Hi guys, we're back doing Wellness Dimension, and I have my guest today, Anthony Berryhill, and we are in the topic of intellectual health. I'll allow him to introduce himself and how he can speak on this topic today. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Of course, go ahead and tell all the audience who you are.
Sure. I'm Anthony Berryhill. I own my own lifestyle company, soon to be launched globally called Elite College Hacker. So what we do in short is very much an education consultancy. So from helping parents and families get into the Ivy or state schools and scholarships of their choice to working with corporations to try to get them to, frankly, take better care of their employees. At a global scale. In terms of why is this a topic that's relevant to me, a little bit about my story. I'm originally from New Orleans, specifically the Lower Ninth Ward, one of the parts that Hurricane Katrina wiped out. So super, super, super poor, violent neighborhood, and very much the kind of place where there isn't intellectual wellness, where the term school to prison pipeline probably got its name. And in terms of the way I got myself out of that, it wasn't through music, it wasn't through sports, it was strictly through academics. And eventually going to one of the toughest college prep schools in high school. And then you can probably see in the background, eventually to Stanford for undergrad, Yale for a PhD, and I currently teach on the instructional staff at Harvard. So I'm into a lot of fancy schools, but I come from an environment where that wasn't really facilitated, which I'm sure we'll talk about here.
Well, thanks for telling the audience about your background, how you got into intellectual health and wellness, and also how you're
Hmm.
helping other people accomplish some of their own goals, right, in this
Yeah.
area. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think of intellectual health when it comes to the support that there is for those who struggle to learn
Mm.
and also maybe don't have the same opportunities as you mentioned? What do you think about this?
Quite a bit. I get the first point. Folks in my background are those from educationally, I would argue, depressed environments. There's been a lot of American history in terms of Jim Crow and like funding issues and a lot of stuff that's caused at least the American education system to be woefully inadequate, particularly from folks from a Black inner city neighborhood, where you have this culture and even a school culture where the idea of being an intellectual or being super academic, it seems so foreign because you don't even have, quality textbooks or buildings that have clean bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this gap where being smart was often, in lower ninth ward, it was often seen as something that's God-given or it's something that is just beyond your ability to control because there's so much a lack of hope in terms of education for good reason. To give you a statistic, the high school I was supposed to go to and I was zoned into, there's like less than a 30% graduation rate. And of the people who were the top 10 students, they usually had to do 2 years of remedial training just to go to community college or just to go to undergraduate. So that's how depraved that situation is. I agree with the question insofar as people who are on the lower side of economics are often in the worst conditions. But what I've learned is that this is something that hits everyone, even globally, even in China, where there's this mass, I know in the news, this mass concern of we're getting all A's but can't survive a freshman class at Stanford in writing. So it's a universal problem, but like many things, if you're under resourced, you get hit the first. You get the hardest, just like in COVID. Um, so with that in mind, I guess my answer to your question is this, which is we think that being smart intellectual is something that is natural or God-given, but what I've learned in my own experience, but what I teach people is these are things that are taught. So wisdom is something that you gain over experience, but intellectual, as I'm sure we'll talk about here, is a set of skills and traits that I reverse engineered for myself because no one taught me that anyone can learn if they have the right support networks, et cetera. So in more under-resourced areas, you're often told you can't build yourself up, and people give up before they start. What I've learned, even in like super rich Chinese families or people from Dubai, et cetera, they come to me with the same problem, which is they can't trust what they're being taught to get into the kind of schools or jobs they need to, which I'm sure we'll talk about what those strategies look like to get around that problem.
So you do believe that socioeconomic status, your ability to pay for these services, the quality that you can actually obtain, the type of
Hmm.
schools, tutors maybe, or learning materials do make a huge difference in
Oh,
the way that we
hmm.
actually achieve our intellectual abilities and how we can move with them.
Hmm.
So from there,
Yep.
I know you made you mentioned wisdom, right? You said that's God
Hmm.
given. You get experience. What would you say when some people state everything's not, test questions. You can't
Hmm.
measure intelligence in schools only. And there are many people
Yep.
who don't do well in tests, but they are very intellectual in many other areas.
Hmm.
What's your opinion on that?
Ooh, lots of spicy opinions, but I'll be concise. I think one of them is I think universally we no one people don't understand how intelligence is understood in the literature, right? Intelligence is seen as what they call a latent variable. It's something you can't measure directly. So the question's exactly right. You can't directly measure it through multiple choice tests and things like that. However, sometimes people go too far, right? So in my old neighborhood, it was well, you're book smart, not street smart, which one of the most racist, silly things I've ever heard in my life because it's a false dichotomy, right? Like these forms of intelligence work together. So an example would be the leader of the Black Panthers, Huey Newton. Yeah, very street smart, right? But highly verbally intellectual. He read philosophy. So these are not separate things. They actually work together. And so, yeah, schools do a terrible job of this. They do not, even Harvard, Stanford, they don't necessarily teach you this is intelligence, this is how it works, this is how people learn, which is why I fill in a lot of that to get people's heads right on these things. So, absolutely, lack of resources are part of it, but I would even add lack of knowledge. So if you don't even know things exist, it doesn't matter what your academic merit is. So this is the answer to all the affirmative action people. Personal example, I would not have applied to Stanford if I wasn't a debater in high school and had learned that the school existed. There's no one in lower ninth where we're saying Stanford exists. So that's also part of it too, that if you don't know what counts as intelligence or what counts as ability, then you have all these systems around you that make you feel like you're stupid. But what's really happening is that you don't have wealth. You don't have someone to kind of grab you saying, look, these multiple choice tests don't matter. Or, hey, you're in law school. Start preparing for the exams week one. Those are the kind of things that rich, high resource people or very, people who've been in these systems will know that will be the difference between getting an A or a D in school.
So I'm moving away a little bit from the schooling and the testing. I do have a question
Hmm.
that I hope you're ready for. What would you say
Sure.
to those who state school doesn't matter, a degree doesn't matter, because most times you won't get the job, there's a lot of competition in the field, or I'm learning things that I'm not
Hmm.
going to use when I actually go in my
Hmm.
career. So a lot of people have these concerns and they feel that they're paying a lot of money for schooling and it's not valuable information.
Hmm.
What would you say about that?
Oh, I agree and disagree at the same time. And this is something I'm not supposed to say, given my background, but I'm always honest with everyone here. If I think a lot of that question, a lot of the thinking is because people haven't, it's weird. For the most intellectual thing that exists, people are not very intellectual about it. So we tend to have, especially in families, right? People are like, oh, this makes sense to me. Of course, Stanford, you need to have perfect grades. Or they'll say things like, of course, you need to be perfect in everything and do 8 sports. But if you talk to the people who are the admissions officers, they scream and yell, please don't think that way. In other words, like we're thinking that college admissions is like high school homework where you need to check your kid's work and make sure it's right. And those are the very people who never get in because they don't kind of get the larger game here. So the larger game of school, it for most people they think go to good high school, go to good college equals job. That was true in the 80s and 90s. It's not true in a global marketplace, and it's not true because AI, other tech, kind of the crashing of the labor job market. It's a much more complicated system. So that's actually right. I tell my students, don't go to these schools because you think they're going to give you a job. It won't. And the other reason it won't because I used to be in HR, I used to be a vice president. I saw how hiring works. It's completely broken. Worse at the top tech firms. So why go to these schools? Well, I think if you think about what the school's supposed to do, it does two things. One, it gives you a lot of that information and wealth knowledge that you don't already have. So when people say things like, "Oh, black students shouldn't go to the Ivies," I scream, "What's the alternative?" That's a silly argument, right? Because if you're not in those rooms, you don't get the $200,000 job, right? You don't have any access whatsoever. So I think that argument is bad. And on the other hand, what I tell people is be a more informed customer. So these schools are great schools to give you information, but they give you resources and people to ask. So the reason I went there was not, I could have gone to an HBCU, but what I was told consistently was if you want to get out of poverty, right, like you need to kind of know what these corporate places are doing, know how our people were socialized, know how the language they use. Um, I think that's the reason to go. If you're going to spend $150,000 because you think it's going to be an easy job, that to me indicates a bigger problem as an applicant because you're not being a well-informed customer. And schools are increasingly asking questions that probe for that kind of knowledge. So yes and no. Yes, but I think people need to change their expectations in order to actually take advantage of whatever schooling they go to.
So based on your answer, I kind of formulated a different question, and it would be,
Hmm.
do you believe that we should be going into fields that we believe we will actually excel in rather than
Hmm.
just something that we may think is going to pay a lot of money, or we may think we can network in, right? Find
Hmm.
people to help us get along the way, but rather actually look at the way we perform in the field, right? Our abilities, how our intellectual tests actually look at
Yeah.
the results and different things like that,
Hmm.
because it will be more of a successful career in the long term.
100 million%. And the irony is that that attitude is actually what helps you get into the school. Because from the school's perspective, they're absolutely frightened. They do not want kids going there thinking, oh, if I just signed up for computer science, $200,000 job, because this doesn't work. So yeah, I think that that's exactly what people should do. I really one of the things that makes me a bit more radical in the college admissions space is that I tell people straight out, don't be popular, don't do what's common, right? Don't follow your family friends. And that's kind of direct because I've seen the consequences of that, which is people will approach a Stanford Yale application or a law school application with their heads in the sky, listening to everything their friends who have no understanding of how this works will tell them. And that leads to disaster. Look at all the people who applied to computer science because it was the hot, popular thing to do. Most of Northern California, when I coached those folks, right? They're now in serious trouble because they didn't even know or research or bother to research what do computer scientists want when they're hiring someone. That's different from the major, violently different. So I think for everyone, we're in this position. It's good and bad. I actually like it because I think, as an education nerd and a learning nerd, what I'm seeing is a lot of the smoke and mirrors being pushed away, things like AI and what's happening. But I do want people who are listening to this to know that we're in a market where you can't rely on other people and kind of other kind of cliched things to do because the market doesn't follow that. I think everyone needs to say, what am I doing and how can I make money from it? Because my God, if people can make money on TikTok and doing silly dances, I mean, I know people who are rich for, because they're 17-year-old and they do YouTubes on F1 and teach people about F1 racing. Other people, they sell like $5 items. Like, I think we're just in an economy where everyone has to be intentional. And I think for those listening, college is a means to an end. It is a stepping stone. It's not the thing that will get you there, but it will make it easier to get there. So that's my motto, which is education is a tool. Be smart about it and like research and know what you're signing up for before you go to a Harvard, Yale, Michigan, what have you.
So you believe you maybe state that's where your wisdom comes in, right? When you are
Hmm.
actually
Sure.
making the decision on how to use that education, what to learn, and how to apply it for yourself what's
Yeah.
also within your budget, right? We don't want to
Yes.
sign up for a long-term debt that we are not sure we could repay also. So I
Oh
wonder
yeah.
if
Hmm.
you have a takeaway for the audience based on your own knowledge over the years, your own business, how you help kids
Sure.
get to that dream school. So
Yeah. I think this is a good what I teach students to do is, well, first off, nothing I do can help unless someone kind of wants to do this stuff. Like you have to, when you talk about intellectual health, you have to want to be intellectual. That's step one. And not everyone wants to do that. People want to get the job for $150,000. They want to get into Harvard. But then I ask them, do you want to write a 25-page term paper? Right? Or for God's sake, like you have me as a grader and I'm dissecting every line of your assignment and taking off points. Most people don't want that kind of pain or smoke. They don't want that kind of rigor. So if you want that kind of rigor, you gotta like be very honest with yourself, right? This is not a space where you can kind of performatively be smart and talk about being smart, but not actually write things or read things, etc. If you cross that line, I think I always encourage my students treat that intellectual work like a sport, like literally like a Division 1 sport. You have to be in good conditioning. That means you need to know how to read well. You need to do a lot of reading. You need to study how to read. Um, Learning how to write. That's another big one. No matter what age you are, even if you're 60, there are people getting PhDs at 60, right? So it's learning how to write in structure. So I talk this from my debate training and teach people how to do those things very consistently. And also just building out those muscles of like the mechanics. So, for example, knowing how to touch type. I've had my students do programs like Mario Teaches Typing in the 1980s to force them to know how to do that. And last, one more tip, memory techniques. One of the things I always did as a kid when I had no friends or family to help me out was just reverse engineer experts. So if you're that person who's like, I don't know how to memorize these things, pick up a book from the world memory champion. From the United States. All these things are around on Amazon and YouTube, and I give assignments making people watch this stuff. It's all out there. Unlike when I was coming up and I had to be kind of creative, those things we can build our own intellectualism. And to be clear, schools don't teach this stuff. They don't. One is because people don't know how to reverse engineer what they do, but two is intentional. There's a lot of ethics. There's a lot of notion of the naturally smart people will get it and everyone else fails. And I don't think people should subject themselves to that if they don't have to. Hence the hacker word of my company.
thank you for sharing all of your input today on this
Hmm.
area. I believe you have a lot of knowledge when it comes to actually preparing yourself, learning methods as
Hmm.
well. And I agree with you with keeping our creative abilities. I believe that AI is kind of taking
Yeah.
over this right now. Many people are not
Can, yeah.
writing their own stuff anymore. They're kind of just going with
Hmm.
the system, and it takes away from our intellectual ability.
Exactly.
It takes away from
Yep.
us being able to create our own work, and that's what makes us unique and special.
Yep.
So
I,
I thank
I have
you.
one quick thought on that, if that may be
Yeah.
helpful. I would tell people with AI, it actually puts more pressure. I mean, I like to say I'm an AI optimist and education pessimist. Um, it puts more pressure on everyone because the standards are higher. What I would tell everyone, I've told this to CEOs, is just don't ever shut your brain off. If you run the AI and you don't know what you're doing and you don't even know what the right answer is, or you don't know how to write, then you can't write good prompts. And then you're going to submit things that you don't even know is full of landmines. So I would tell everyone it's more of a reason to get good at writing by yourself, reading by yourself, because as this becomes more prolific, more of the people who are making those decisions about do you get a job, do you get into college, they're more and more, they're getting smart too. They have AI experts as well. So I would tell everyone, get good fundamental skills. I'll leave you with this. It's like when people try to cheat with AI, it's like saying, I want to learn how to, I'm going to run and get in shape by watching people run on YouTube. Doesn't work, but that's what people are doing with AI.
Thank you so much. I'm very
Hmm.
glad you made it today. I believe we talked about
Thank
really
you.
good points, and hopefully we'll do another segment soon. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.